So we're going to stick with the world's theme because, after all, that is the theme for the Rouleur Classic this year, and it's a gift that keeps on giving. Who remembers the last time a British man won the World Championships? Yeah, come on, don't be shy. I think we all remember that, don't we? Who would like to know what went on behind the scenes in what was called Project Rainbow? Yeah, I think I would too. The man who was charged with being road captain on that day in 2011 in Copenhagen to deliver the Manx missile to the line was David Millar.
Thanks, Matt.
David, good to see you. Good to see you as always. Always so much to talk to you about, but we are going to zone in on what was Project Rainbow. And it predated the actual race day by quite a long way. So what was the sort of genesis of the idea that Copenhagen could provide the first winner of the rainbow jersey since Tommy Simpson?
It was actually very much a Rod Ellingworth British cycling project, and very much a personal project from Rod Ellingworth, who was the coach, who is now the head coach at Team Sky, and who developed that whole generation we have now of Geraint Thomas, Mark Cavendish, Ian Stannard, Luke Rowe, etc. They were all his protégés. But when they were doing the Olympic success and winning so many medals on the track, during that process, they had, Dave Brailsford and Rod Ellingworth and Shane Sutton at the time, this vision of moving onto the road. And that vision involved creating Team Sky and also winning the Tour de France, which seemed just a ridiculous concept when they had that project in 2008 and they were putting it together. But within that, you also had win the World Championships. And that was something they could do with British cycling. And that was Rod's little baby. And when they saw, you find out a few years before, what the course is going to be for each Worlds, they knew Copenhagen was going to be a flat Worlds 4 years out. And they thought, well, they know Mark's the fastest sprinter in the world. Let's do this. It's Project Rainbow. Let's win the World Championships.
Even that far out, because that was at the time he was at T-Mobile. He was starting to show his talent, but he was nowhere near the finished article that far out. So was it always Mark, we're going to ride for Mark this far out?
Yeah, it was I mean, I think British cycling are very good at that. And Dave Brailsford and Rod Ellingworth and Shane Sutton at the time were very good at that. It's analytical. They knew the course suited him. It's plan A. There's no B, C, D, E, F. We were just going for plan A. But what they did for Project Rainbow was they did it 3 years out. The year before, we'd gone to Australia, to Geelong, which were the Worlds were, the road race. And what they did there, I wasn't even party to this. I didn't realize what they were doing. They knew for the Olympic course that they were going to move us to a hotel the night before. And so what they did the year before in Copenhagen, and they did it again at the Olympics in 2012. So it's amazing the amount of thinking that goes into these different levels. In Melbourne, for Geelong, they moved us. They essentially simulated not only Project Rainbow, but also the Olympic road race. They were planning all different things at the same time. But yeah, Project Rainbow is very much, they like doing things that haven't been done. Like Tommy Simpson won it in 1965. And why haven't we won the road race since?
It was, as you say, wrapped up in the sort of creation of Team Sky with Dave and you yourself, even though you're closely, I guess, related to Team Sky through your sister Fran. You obviously know Dave. He was with you back in the years before when things went a bit, tits up, to put it bluntly. It was their thing, but you weren't in Team Sky, and you were never going to be in Team Sky. So how did that conversation happen where they said, look, Rod and Dave, we want you to be the road captain who calls the shots in Copenhagen?
Yeah, that was quite a weird one, because of my doping past and the zero tolerance policy from Team Sky, I could never be part of Team Sky. And yet, they needed me for the British team. For Team GB, they didn't have their zero tolerance policy, so I could race for them. And I was the best road captain they had in the UK. So they knew, and Mark and I roomed with Mark in the days before. Mark and I were quite close, even we've never been in the same team, only on national teams. And Mark's very astute and he's very clever, and everyone knows this when you work with him. He picks his team. He's an amazing team leader. But he knows that he has to have a captain. Because when you're a leader and you're given the responsibility of winning the race, when you're in the race, all you want to do is trust somebody else within your team to handle all the stress, to create a firewall between your responsibility to win and all the stresses that are going on. And that was my job. My job as road captain was to create this massive firewall from Mark so that he never had to panic. He had implicit trust in all my decisions, and within our team and also dictating the other teams. Because what happens is in a big race like this, every team has their road captains, and the road captains will then talk to each other and make decisions together that dictate the whole shape of the race.
Was there any controversy around that? Because I know in 2012, ahead of the Olympics, there was a bit of hubbub about you being involved because of the past. Was there any of that around the planning of 2011 in Copenhagen?
No, none at all. No, it was quite weird. The Olympics kind of sit separate to the World Championships. The World Championships is essentially another pro race. It's another classic. It's another monument. It's the only time in the year that we wear national jerseys. Professional cycling is quite strange like that. We only have one day a year where we race as nationally, and you bring all these different riders in. But for me, on that day coming in, it was a purely qualitative decision. It was, we need the best guys here. And it was an amazing team. We had, it was at the beginning of the ascending spiral of Team Sky. Just coming out of the Vuelta, you'd had Chris Froome finish second, Bradley Wiggins finish third. You had Mark Cavendish, who was in his pomp as a sprinter, just dominating everything. You had Ian Stannard, who was flying, Steve Cummings, who was just coming into his kind of pomp. So you had Geraint Thomas. None of us knew he was a future Tour de France winner. And you had this amazing team, this depth of talent. But there was another thing that, regards Project Rainbow, that they did. I remember on the team bus, before the race started, we knew we were going to be wearing speed suits. Never in the history of a road race that had a whole team turned out in speed suits. And normally be very embarrassed about that. But we'd made a decision as a team, we're not going to be embarrassed to turn up on a start line in speed suits. And that almost that set the tone immediately.
Was this from the Secret Squirrel lot? Was this Boardman and
yeah,
those
very
guys?
much. I mean, they'd analysed everything. They did the tech, and we knew that it was going. And even our tactics. I remember the days before, because Bradley is such a phenomenal athlete, but he one-day road races, he underestimated what he could do. And even in the discussions in the weeks before, he was pretty convinced that he was going to last till 6 laps to go. And he wanted to do all the dog's body work at the beginning so that he could jump out. And I remember going to Rod's room 2 nights before and going, Rod, Bradley can last. He can go to the last lap. We know this. And Rod and I sat there on his bed, and it's like, what we're going to do is we're going to tell him that he's going to do all the early work. And so he actually started the race that day thinking that he was going to do the early work that Steve Cummings and Chris Froome did. And actually, as road captain, I said, Bradley, no, come here, sit on my wheel. You're not working. And I just held him back like the whole race. And that was one of those things, but he had no idea he was going to do that.
Did he like being told what to do?
Bradley does. He loves it. He loves having a road captain that tells him exactly what to do. He loves having a leader that tells him what to do because he loves controlling the variables, Bradley, but he likes someone else to control them for him in many ways.
It was still not a foregone conclusion, but I suppose it was the first time that really Team Sky plus you showed their hand in trying to control a race by just making it harder for everybody else. Because those turns that Brad and Stannard ended up doing were monumental turns. They were huge. Yeah.
There were a couple of reasons to this one, because Mark Cavendish he's a freak of nature in many ways. And one of them, the fact is, which none of you will have ever seen, when he's with a team in a hotel, and he's done it since he was in the national team as a junior and as an under-23, when he walks around the hotels, he's always got riders following him. He's like the Pied Piper. He's like, they just follow Mark. And he's amazing like that. He's got such charisma. Yeah. And when he decides to do something, he normally fulfills the promise. And him and Rod, and I was party to this, they knew that they were planning Copenhagen for Project Rainbow, that this was all designed. We only had plan A, there's no B, C, D, E, F. This is Mark, he's going to win. And that's a massive responsibility. And a lot of riders freak out on that. Mark thrives off that. And I was a road captain, and I roomed with him. And
what was he like the night before?
I don't know, he's amazing. Because already he's completely OCD in the sense that his rooms are perfect. In Geelong the year before in Melbourne, he was in the room opposite me. We had our own rooms. And I went in to his room. I got up for breakfast. I'd gone for breakfast, came back, and just went into his room. So we always leave our keys in the door. And I went in, and it was just perfect. The bed was made, kind of, there's suitcases there, everything. It looked like he'd not been in there, or the chambermaids had been in there, or whatever. And I went to breakfast, and I was like, Chris, what's going on? He said, and I realized he makes his bed every morning, perfectly. And everything's out, his suitcases hung up. And then if he's packing, everything's perfect. Everything he does is completely OCD organized. And then rooming with him like that, if he's planning to go for an objective, he ticks all these boxes. And we were watching, because what we normally do is, even doesn't matter how much you know the course, you don't know it until you race on it. So we normally use the under-23 race as a gauge of what's going to happen. So the day before, I think it was on the Friday actually, the race is on the Sunday, we're watching the under-23 race, and me and Cav we're in our beds next to each other watching the race. And it's by the last lap, it's turning into a sprint, and we're both kind of moving. By the end of it, we're sitting on the end of our edges of our bed, and it's a sprint. And it ends up being a bunch sprint. And Mark just jumps up, he's like, fucking hell, I'm going to win. and I remember that vividly. And I was like, you crazy bastard. and that's what then gave us the confidence, gave me the confidence as road captain. Yeah. On the day, still, I tell this story quite often. What normally happens in the road race is that it's so long, it's 270 kilometers, and there's laps. It's got a very clear format. There are a flurry of little attacks. The brake goes early on. There's about 2 or 3 laps or 45 minutes of ease or total takeoff. Don't ride much. Everyone has calls of nature. Then it starts. That day, what we did was, the flurry attacks went, the brake went, and I said, guys, we ride now. Just go. And Jeremy Hunt, who was his responsibility was bodyguard Cav, because my role was to control the whole peloton, the race, our team, the tactics, all these different things going on. And so I didn't actually have to deal with Cav. That was Jeremy Hunt's job. And Jez came up to me, and I've known Jez for years, and he was like, Dave, I'm going to stop for a piss. And I was like, Jez, not today. And I still remember that. I thought, that's the fucking coolest thing I've ever said. And we just ripped the race to pieces all day. Yeah.
I can't quite remember who was the last man before Cav launched his sprint. Do you remember?
It was supposed to be G.
Yeah. Yes, it
Yeah.
didn't quite go right, did it? That's
No, and this again, because by the time it was the last lap, I was completely spent, and Wiggle did his last job, then it went in, and so it was gone. And in the last lap, I found Jez, and Jez and me were off the back, we were dropped, and there was a big screen about 5Ks from the finish, and we stopped and we climbed over the barriers and went into the crowds.
So you never finished the race?
No, then we got back on and finished. Okay. But we wanted to watch the sprint. So Jez and I are standing in a field.
In your kit?
Just in kit with our bikes. We're watching and thinking, and they came around that final corner, and G's job was to do the final push, and hats off, to be honest with you, that's a big responsibility to have, because then you're into the chaos. And the chaos overrode, and he got swamped, and he couldn't do anything. Any other bike racer in the world, apart from Cav, it was over.
Yeah.
How he pulled it out, I don't know. And I remember Jez and I were watching it, and we were like, oh no, it all went wrong in the last 500 meters, 600 or 800 meters. And you saw it all going wrong. And it felt it, and it still gives me goosebumps. I thought, it's done. And then Cav somehow found a gap. But it was, so that's what you can do. You can do that for 7 hours, 6 hours, control everything. And it all comes down to those last 40 seconds. And Cav's the person that can always deliver in those last 40 seconds. It's phenomenal.
I just remember shouting at a screen as well here in London, just phenomenal. And my wife still doesn't understand road cycling. Final question. What were the celebrations like?
Yeah, good. We didn't have any celebrations planned.
That doesn't sound like you.
No, I then organised it. But yeah, and then it was Steve and I was like, right. So we then organised like nibbles and we had a really nice night actually in Copenhagen. Nothing really crazy or big. I remember vividly, because these are those magic days where when you accomplish something of that scale, you make sure when it's going on to remember it. And I remember we got back to the hotel one by one, and we're sitting in the foyer, and Froome dog. I mean, we had no idea at the time that we also had 3 Tour de France winners there. It's crazy.
It is crazy.
Yeah, Chris Froome, Bradley Wiggins, Geraint Thomas. In this foyer hotel, we're all thrashed. It's empty. There's no kind of, it's cycling, nothing's glamorous. And we're just coming in one by one, and we're just having beers, and it's like, I just won the Worlds.
And you're right, 8 months later,
Yeah.
you've got the first British winner of the Tour de France in his yellow jersey, leading out the world champion on the Champs-Elysees. And it still gives me goosebumps to hear about it and think about it. And it gives me goosebumps talking to you about it as well, David. David Millar.
Thank you. Thanks, Matt.
Yeah.
Does anybody know anything about Wisdom, Cricket Wisdom books? This is the new book that Ned Bolting's done, my co-commentator. It's an amazing book. It's literally got every race, every story, and it's going to happen every year. So you create a tome of every year of bike racing. So yeah, look it up, the road book. And Kenny Van Vlaming's on now.
You're doing my job now. Is that for me as well?
No, I was given that. Oh, you can get another one. Do you want that one?
Yeah, great.
There you go.
You don't ask, you don't get. David Millar, ladies and gentlemen. Actually, I think...
Yeah, it's nice.